was it from 2 years today? So over the past few years, the benchmark value was introduced in order to help reduce the cost of importation of certain products. After engagement with the particular organized private associations on behalf of the local manufacturers and producers, I have expected that we will come to a point where some of the products where Ghana has local manufacturing and production base will be protected in a way that if you are importing from these products, you don't necessarily need a benchmark value reduction of 50%. Otherwise, you'll be harming your own local production. And at a certain point, I remember hearing this argument between the sector ministry and between the organized private associations that we have product A, we have product B, we have product C locally. They have potential. So please take off the benchmark value from product A, product B, product C, but leave the ones on the product which we do not have. So if, for example, I don't know, automobiles, or no, automobiles is an exception. So if electronics and some of the manufacturing goods which are being imported, and you don't actually have a replacement in Ghana here. So if you have a 50% benchmark reduction on that one, that makes sense, because then you are encouraging the local consumption of a product that is not available internally. Okay. But when you, for example, enforce a benchmark value on the product which you produce more or less in abundance in the country, then you are working against the interests of the manufacturers and producers locally. So there should be some kind of alignment between the policies and the priorities of the manufacturers and producers in a particular country.
Okay. I just received a message from our viewer. He said he wants to go into import and export, but he wants to find out the current rate of importing goods from other country to our country. He wants to find out the exact amount.
The exact amount. So are we talking about the foreign exchange rates, or are we talking about the volumes of goods that are imported?
I'm sure you'd have to elaborate
exported?
that, since it's his first time venturing into such.
So if I understand the question correctly, someone is looking at identifying the areas in the market where he can identify a need.
Yes.
And then you want to either fulfill that need by locally producing or by importing from outside to satisfy your market. And so it's a process. You have to identify the products and the needs in the market, not necessarily just locally, because when you say you want to go into import-export, now, whether you can actually focus on both at the same time or whether you want to qualify all of your activities under impacts. But basically, if you are coming into the market, if you are importing, then you have local needs, you identify your markets, and then you find out what are the products that you want to target, and then you do your homework by looking at the cost of these products in the local markets, and then you look and you do your cost analysis of how much can you provide that same product for, and identify whether you can actually compete in that particular industry or not. If it's an export, it becomes a little bit more complicated, because now you have to look for the management information systems of the markets in other countries which you want to identify or to work with, and find out where they have certain areas that are not being met locally, which means in country A or country B, they don't have product X or product Y. And I have of that product X and Y in my country. And I can bring it to that country at a particular rate. So you have to work on the cost of exporting, your export cost, and then the cost of moving your goods to that country, and how much can you provide that particular product at. And so if you can produce or you can fulfill the need of that market at that particular cost, then it makes sense for you to start to develop your business in a way that can allow you to fulfill that need. But it's not easy. Export is not just is not as easy as import, because you need to meet certain quality standards and certain requirements and certain regulatory requirements. And actually doing business across Africa, if his market is in Africa, doing business across Africa is a bit of a challenge, because we haven't even spoken, for example, about the financial restrictions of transacting business from one local currency to another local currency. So there are so many other challenges that needs to be considered before you look at taking the step of actually moving into import-export and to fulfill the requirements in markets overseas. So I guess the more logical transition would be to start by identifying your local needs and then start to import products in a certain markets, and then find out whether you can use the same products you're importing to import them to somewhere else, or to export from the country where you are operating or registering your business to another market. And it's not for the faint heart, because trades, anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
And especially in days like these past few weeks or few months, where the currency volatility does not allow you to plan ahead and to forecast what your actual real costs will be. If you planned last month, for example, to import goods into the country, and these goods would have been valued at 14 cedis to a dollar at the Ghana Revenue at the customs in Tema Port. But today, that same product arriving this week would be valued at 8.5 for the week. I think that's very difficult to plan around, right? And you never know what next week would be, or the week after, or 2 or 3 weeks into it. So in times of uncertainty, it becomes very difficult to plan ahead. And the easiest thing is to manage around, or to consolidate around the current activity instead of expanding. Now, at the same time, I don't want to be gloomy about it, because look, economies run in cycles. And they can't keep picking all the time, and they can't keep coming down all the time. They go up and down and up and down. But for example, you take an example of Ghana, and you look at the way the economies have been going up and down. However, the trajectory has been upwards for the past many years. Even though there has been cycles and ups and downs, all the way from maybe from 2006 to now. I don't want to extrapolate too much into the past, but the trajectory of Ghana has been upwards, despite the fact that we were going through recessions and expansions all the time. But that is the way economy is. It moves in cycles, ups and downs, but always in the right direction, thankfully, in Ghana. And let's pray that it will continue like this.
Sure. We pray that it will continue like this, especially as a layperson entering into the trade industry, import and export, is not for the faint heart, as Mr. Ziad had said. We're going on a quick break. We'll be right back.
Here in APMT Liberia, we're training employees to have the mindset of lean. Ensure that when you come to work, you don't just come to do your job, but you come also to do some thinking and also some kaizens. So currently, as you can see here in our environment, we're currently doing a kaizen on 5S, which is basically to improve the safety in our work environment. After doing the lesson, we split the team into groups where they're being assigned to a specific store. And in those stores, they're tasked to ensure that the place is clean, neat, and also everything is at its right place. So what we hope to achieve is not only to build that culture where people are aware of the environment and also the safe working space, but also for them to have that mindset. And the mindset that we're talking about is that 5S mindset. Every time you take something, you always question yourself, where am I putting it? Am I putting it at the right spot? Is it something I really need to do my work? And it is also proven that when you have a 5S mindset, you can improve your productivity by 30%. And that is excellent. Why? Because you can easily find what you're looking for. Everything is at its right space, the right place for everything. So when you need something, you can easily go fetch for it without wasting any time. And we know that in our industry, customer waiting is one of the biggest wastes. And we can reduce that a lot just by doing the 5S Kaizen and also the 5S mindset.
Welcome back from that very quick break. This is still Port and Maritime Agenda. And for all your freight forwarding, shipping and logistics supply chain, anything that comes to do with import and export, contact the Consolidated Shipping Agency, Conship for short. They have a branch in Tema, Takrade, Kumasi, among others. I'm sure when you get in touch with them, they would sort you out. So during the conversation, I'll give out the numbers so that you can get in touch with them. And Mr. Ziad Hamoui is still our guest on Port and Maritime Agenda. Mr. Ziad, there's a saying, it's out there that Africans should trade among itself. What's your take on that?
I think we do not trade enough among ourselves, and the statistics are there. It shows that the intra-African trade volumes are much too low, lower than intra-African trade in even South America or North America or Europe or Asia. We just simply don't trade enough. And it's not just because much of the trade that we do trade among ourselves is informal. But even if you add up the informal trade volumes among ourselves, we still don't trade enough as African countries. And perhaps part of the reason we don't trade that much among ourselves is that the trade connectivity among ourselves is not that developed because of the infrastructure, because maybe most of the African countries were designed or configured in a way so that they can export out of the continent, out of the country in raw material, and then they import back in finished products. And that might be one of the reasons why. But that is not an excuse why we didn't, as Africans, develop our infrastructures and our trade networks to trade among ourselves. Now, I believe we are focusing on intra-African trade and boosting intra-African trade. However, I also believe that we need to start to prioritize intra-African transportation in order to boost intra-African trade. And to talk about boosting intra-African transportation, I think we need to talk about enhancing African connectivity to itself, whether by roads or by air or by sea. We need to focus on connecting the African countries together because we do have the markets, we do have the products, and we need to find out the best way to produce better, to trade among ourselves better, and to move our traded products better in a competitive and effective way. Part of the reason we don't trade enough among ourselves is because our products are either not competitive enough against the other products that are traded in other African markets, or because of connectivity issues, our product arrives at a much higher cost than it is to import. Or it takes much longer to get from one African market to another African market. And this affects the volume of trade. If your trade cannot be competitive as an African country against an international product, then basically whoever is importing or exporting will go to where the product is more competitive. And so my answer to your question is that yes, I'm a great believer that there are African opportunities in African markets for African products and goods and services. But I also believe that we need to tackle the connectivity issues and to enhance the movement of goods, of people, of information, and of services, which at the moment I think have a lot of issues. For example, just a few days ago, there was a conference in Accra on the single African air transport market, where basically the stakeholders were trying to combine Africa into one large open skies market. And I believe I heard that about 17 countries have made pledges to open up respectively their airspace to each other in order to accelerate the implementation of the single African air transport market. And that is important because you don't really need to transit from one African country to a third-party country before you move to your next destinations. I mean, look, last month, for example, there was the Africa Industrialization Day in Niamey, and there is not a single person who visited Niamey for the event who doesn't have a story of how many countries and how many hours it took him before he arrived in Niamey eventually. Accra, Niamey shouldn't be more than 2.5 hours by air, but you go through 2, 3, 4 cities before you get there. That's if you are lucky. Some people coming from Mauritius took 30 hours to arrive. So that's a lot of, and you're talking air transport, you're not talking road transport. And that's only one mode of transportation. For shipping, we have something similar also. Most of the goods that transit from one African country to the other have to pass through a non-African country to transit, and that adds the cost and the time of the trade, and that is not right. We have to look at creating a single African framework for short sea shipping, which means every African market should open up to another African shipping opportunity in the same way. And then we have the movement of people. At the African Union level, Agenda 2063 has been advancing the free movement of people protocol. But currently, while, for example, the ratifications for the AFCFTA stand at 44 countries out of 54, the ratifications for the freedom of movement protocol is at 4. And it will enter automatically into force at 15. So we are short of 11. So it's moving at a much slower rate than anticipated. For some reason, there is more hesitancy towards the free movement of African people across Africa than you might think. And so we need to think about how to mobilize the political will to accelerate the implementation and the ratification of the free movement protocol of the African Union so that people can move freer, so that trade can also follow. Where people move, trade will move. And so if you allow the freer movement of goods and people, then you will accelerate trade. And when you accelerate trade, you would accelerate economic development across Africa. That is what I can say.
Oh, okay. But why is international trade so important to most countries?
Because the markets are established already for so many years. Because the international trade system has been in existence for the past 100 years or more. And so the markets are established. And in some of the more established markets, you have stability in terms of the prediction and the availability and the connectivity to these markets. So if you happen to be interested in sourcing or procuring certain amounts of product A or product B, and then you know that you can get this amount for this price at this time, and it will arrive at this time from this country or that, then you would be more likely to rely on the international markets than you would in exploring local markets and then finding the right information, the relevant information that is reliable, that will show you that this product can be available from this country and for this cost, and that I can bring them in through this means, and it will cost me this much to arrive. So international markets at the moment provide much more stability and predictability, especially for traders. And when you're a trader, you know that eventually you'll buy at this cost, you'll sell at this cost, you'll pass on your cost to your consumers. And it will be the consumer who will foot the cost of your product. So what we're trying to say is that let us look at a system where we can build more predictability and reliability at the local products originating from Africa, including ourselves, of course, in Ghana. And then we'll try to see how we can build this into a more economically sustainable system to the benefit of both our governments and our businesses and our citizens who are consumers at the end of the day.
Hello, my name is Clay Crane. 2023 is with us, and I would like to take the opportunity to wish all a safe and happy New Year. APM Terminals Liberia has, over the years, been a leader in port operations in Liberia. Together with our partners, we have continuously invested in cutting-edge technology to modernize the Freeport of Monrovia to fulfill its mandate as the gateway of the Liberian economy. This year, we are poised to accelerate this vision.
So we are going to contribute to accelerating the vision in 2023 by improving the already good outcomes of our digitization to give our customers, our users and staff a better experience by collaborating with our external stakeholders.
In accelerating the vision in 2023, we will keep the customer at the center and at the heart of what we do.
We are always developing our people here at APM Terminals Liberia by equipping them with the needed knowledge, skills, and exposure. They will be empowered to deliver more as we accelerate our vision this year.
APM Terminals Liberia continue to perform well in health and safety thanks to our continuous adaptation to ways of working and safer handling of cargo. We have recorded 0 fatality in 2022. 2023, we're going to continue to accelerate our vision for safety to ensure that we are safer, bigger, and better.
At APM Terminals Liberia, operations demand efficiency. There is a renewed sense of enthusiasm amongst the team. Everyone is aware of how critical our work is with regards to accelerating the vision of APM Terminals.
Happy New Year and welcome to the year 2023. We are aware of the global economic challenges, but we want to take this opportunity to assure our staff and our stakeholders that APM Terminals Liberia will put in the right investments in support of our bigger, better, and safer global operations to allow for the greater economic growth and prosperity of Mama Liberia.
We are committed to continuous quality service to our stakeholders, partners, and agencies here in Liberia.
Here in APMT Liberia, we're training employees to have a mindset, the mindset of lean. Ensure that when you come to work, you don't just come to do your job, but you come also to do some thinking and also some kaizens. So currently, as you can see here in our environment, we're currently doing a kaizen on 5S, which is basically to improve the safety in our work environment. After doing the lesson, we split the team into groups where they're being assigned to a specific store. And in those stores, they're tasked to ensure that the place is clean, neat, and also everything is at its right place. So what we hope to achieve is not only to build that culture where people are aware of the environment and also the safe working space, but also for them to have that mindset. And the mindset that we're talking about is that 5S mindset. Every time you take something, you always question yourself, where am I putting it? Am I putting it at the right spot? Is it something I really need to do my work? And it is also proven that when you have a 5S mindset, you can improve your productivity by 30%. And that is excellent. Why? Because you can easily find what you're looking for. Everything is at its right space, the right place for everything. So when you need something, you can easily go fetch for it without wasting any time. And we know that in our industry, waiting, customer waiting is one of the biggest wastes. And we can reduce that a lot just by doing the 5S Kaizen and also the 5S mindset.
Okay, so Mr. Zia, you were telling us about Tarzan being in the cocoa industry for 43 years. Can you please throw more light on that for us?
So the relevance of working in the cocoa logistics industry in one country for 43 years, you manage to appreciate the subtleties of the industry, especially from a production perspective and from a logistics perspective. And I guess the reason I'm saying this is because it's not easy to extrapolate that a certain country is making headwind with its production and to reach a conclusion that it might become or overtake. But at the same time, it is useful for a country like Ghana, which is known for its cocoa production, is currently the second largest producer in the world, not only to keep its eye on the ball, but also to keep its eye on its competitors, to find out that how to devise the strategies and the policies that allow it to maintain its market position as a leading cocoa producer, so that it will continue to rely on its dominance in the industry towards the economic development of its country, and also to add more value in the industry as a major player. I think in conclusion, it might not necessarily be the case that Ecuador would overtake Ghana, but competition is good, so that it will keep the main producers on their toes in order to make sure that they sharpen their skills and continue to be competitive in the near future, even in the longer term future.
Okay. So what should be the approach, or what measures should Ghana put in place for this overtaking not to happen, in case?
Well, I think that Ghana is currently working with the other regional players to consolidate their collective bargaining position in the industry, but that they are also really trying to look at ways to add more value into their local manufacturing and production for the benefit of the local manufacturers and producers, not the international ones. And look, cocoa is a complicated industry. It has politics in it, it has economics, it has a lot of things inside, and there is potential. There is potential, and at the same time, there are things that need to take place in order to make sure that you continue to evolve the industry, take into consideration the many factors that include climate change, for example, changes. How would climate change affect the various producing countries? Some of the production practices. There are issues that the industry is tackling together, collectively, and there are issues where countries will try to come up with the policies that will unlock the opportunities of exporting their local manufactured products beyond. I think we can use more of patroning our cocoa-based products in Ghana, and even to export our products across African markets, because they have a certain high quality, and because it will help us and other countries to build healthier bilateral trade relations among the different African countries.
Okay. Mr. Ziad, as the governing chairman of the CILT Ghana, that's Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, the TEMA section, you are the chairman of the TEMA section. Can you, for somebody watching us for the first time, can you really tell us what CILT Ghana is all about?
So the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport is one of the leading international professional bodies that promote the arts and the science of logistics and transport. For me personally, I call them my second home, because I have been a member of the CILT Governing Council, but before that I have been a member since 2006, I think. I have to check and remember. But the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport has been around in Ghana since several decades now, and has been growing. You find practitioners from the shipping industry, from the transport, from freight forwarders, and all of them working together collectively to drive the profession onwards. Myself, I'm a chartered fellow recently for the past 2 years. And there are, depending on your qualifications, there are memberships status, starting from an affiliate to a member, and then to a chartered member, and then chartered fellow. And so it is a status that reflects your professional qualifications, but it's also a networking opportunity for the various members.
Oh, okay. The discussion is getting interesting, but we really have to wrap up. So wrapping up, Mr. Zia, from where you sit as an industry player, how can Ghana become the perfect hub for international trade?
We have to align more between the policymakers and the policy takers. We have to look at our policies. We have to look at the implementation of these policies. And we have to keep in mind the fact that we need to provide an enabling environment that allows trade and transportation to thrive in our country more than others. I still believe that Ghana can position itself as an economic gateway, not just to the sub-region, but to the rest of the continent. In fact, we do host the AFCFTA Secretariat. And despite the current temporary economic challenges we find ourselves in, I still believe that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that depending on how we tackle the main current challenges, and then the future looks bright.
Great. The future will definitely look bright. So your final submission to our viewers, Sales Ghana members, Borderlands Alliance Association members, and the whole public here.
From my various positions and capacities, I think I would like to acknowledge that 2022 was a challenging year with its ups and downs, with its gains and losses for all of us, whether we are private practitioners or whether we are logisticians or traders or manufacturers or policymakers. It's been a tough year. But I believe that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is cause to rejoice, and there's cause for hope. And so this being the dying days of a tough year, I hope that we will all start to look together to an even more successful 2023. Let us maintain the hope. Let us keep the faith. Let us believe that as one we can overcome.
Thank you so much for receiving us and having time for this discussion. We are so much grateful.
Thank you very much for coming.
So this is how we wrap up on today's episode of Port and Maritime Agenda, and Mr. Ziad Hamoui has been our guest. He's Executive Director of Tazan Enterprise Limited. As mentioned earlier, a chartered logistician, a regional integration advocate, and a social entrepreneur. The discussion has been interesting and educative, but we really have to end it here. Big thanks to my crew, Naya and Bagon, for doing the switching and everything. Thank you so much. And for you, our viewers also doing the watching, we can't run Port and Maritime Agenda without your interest. Thank you so much for watching. You can also follow Port and Maritime Agenda on Facebook, that is Port and Maritime Agenda. On YouTube is Maritime TV Live. Also, to be a sponsor or to advertise on our program, you can call 0249 605539, 0249 605539. We'd be glad to advertise your product or anything pertaining to advertisement on our program segment. Port and Maritime Agenda is proudly shown on Crystal TV Extra. Yes, Crystal TV Extra. My hair and makeup is by Vespalmer's Beauty Salon. You can locate Vespalmer's Beauty Salon in Ashaiman at J. Kujo, yes, and then she would sort you out. Keep watching Port and Maritime Agenda for more.